So, it's springtime and we're at the waterfall of Astrolabe Cottage, and there are some flowers coming up, and I was rather curious. What do you think all this about flowers coming up came from, really?
Well, I guess if you look back across time, you first have to ask, why flowers?
Well, it seems like they're generally used to attract pollinators for reproduction between plants, but it seems like, then the pollinators would have had to come from somewhere too, so why would they have ever...
Right, of course. And and now that you have me thinking about pollinators, I also think about the way flowers are used under the sea, meaning with attractive corals and attractive sea urchins that actually use the flower, as it were, as bait, not to attract pollinators, but as bait to attract something to eat. And so maybe flowers, or the usefulness of flowers, first evolved deep in the race, back in the undersea world before life crawled onto the earth.
Well, it would still be on the earth, but it simply wouldn't be...
Oh, good point.
Water,
onto the dirty earth.
Yes. And therefore making it less dirty, or more dirty, I suppose, from decay.
So everybody wanting to get ahead faster in an evolutionary sense would obviously have already become sexual, meaning you got two to tango before you get an offspring, which gives you diversity of genetics. And so as that took place, ways to attract a favorable mate, ways to attract, well, pollination to begin with, or cross pollination, and there's between species, or between individuals. Yeah, so you got diversity. Would be to come up with wave a flag in there and say, hey, anybody interested? And a flower does that better than anything.
But then they would have had to count on the fact that that there would be something wanting to come to their flower and pick up the pollen to spread it around. Because
oh, right.
Because the plants won't really be attracting other plants. They can't see each other.
Chicken egg kind of problem. So,
yes.
So that would go to say that, well, like all evolution, you've got a bunch of random what just happened, which is sort of variability through, I want to say through cosmic rays that mess with the genetic strains and give you randomized, what a weird idea. So you have a bud come out, and because of some cosmic ray, it happens to produce pigments or whatever that give it something colorful, and it's wishing to pollinate with something, but rather than depend on random wind currents, suddenly a bee or a bug comes to explore something unusual. Wait, there's co-evolution here, isn't there? Because the bug has to then be interested in colorful things.
Yeah, so whatever pollinators decided they wanted to drink nectar out of certain plants because they were colorful had to develop color sight or vision so that they can...
Right. So who knows? Maybe flowers are in part what has, if not produced color sight, or the ability to see color, but has amplified it tremendously because it became the source not of just, oh gosh, a pretty flower. Usually pretty flowers indicate that there's delicious pollen inside and nutrition. So, now there's a curious thing. It's switched from underwater, where the flower produces something for the flowering species to eat, to the flower producing things for the visitor to eat in exchange for delivering pollen.
So it seems like they're completely different types of flowers, and did they really even come from the same place if they're serving such different purposes, I suppose?
Oh, right. Well, I would say that the possibility of becoming a flower may have come from the same genetic spread of possibilities. all genetics, of course, carry a spread of the what's called adjacent possible, which is what they might be more susceptible to become. And so, yeah, how deeply is the susceptibility or the adjacent possible of being a flower? How deep in the blood or sub-blood of a species, or of our species, going back almost to the beginning of one-celled animals, where being of interest, as a flower is, becomes of value.
Well, well, it seems like I suppose it's possible that they could have come from the same place, but that's a pretty big gap. And,
Well, yeah, it may be to figure that almost in a later exploration of the deep sources of genetic possibilities, and stick with the function of flowers, because they certainly they not only attract a pollinator, they attract specific pollinators.
That's true. They attract ones that can specifically fit into their types of flowers and are attracted to specifically their types of flowers, and won't pollinate with or spread their pollen to flowers they can't reproduce with too much.
Right, and you realize that there has to be once again coevolution, where a cooperative, not just cooperative amongst species, but cooperative amongst the evolution of both species, a cooperative desires, you might say, to cooperative desires that end up where you have two species that become symbiotic, that become really dependent on each other for good things.
That must have been quite a stroke of luck when they both happened to get hit by some rays of the sun, and
yes,
one got to see color and one got to got to show color.
Yes, and of course they could be over a grand span of time of incremental advances, but in some ways, like eyesight and other things, it takes not only one exquisite coincidence, but two simultaneously becomes so ultrally exquisite and unlikely. And yet, if you have a universe with a zillion stars in it and half a zillion planets, and half a zillion with life, that gives you quite a few zillions of chances per moment, and there are a lot of moments in the universe.
That's the truth. And so, I suppose it's not so surprising after all that plants evolved to have flowers that...
And we are here looking at flowers in the spring.
And enjoying them.
On a bridge looking at a waterfall by Astrolabe Cottage in Lithia, Virginia. All right.
Yes. And we'll see you next week here at the same waterfall.